So I do not know if they're having issues or what.
Your clinic for tomorrow got canceled?
Yeah. I just think it gave me concern.
Okay, let's hit pause on this convo. Are we streaming live already?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, hey everybody. Looks like we're just missing Neil. Let me give him a Okay, Neil said that he'll be here in a few moments, but I told him that we'd start with the roll call and the Pledge of Allegiance, just so that way we kind of keep going and stuff. Okay, so I'm going to call this meeting to order at 4:31 p.m. Start off with roll call. Ms. Ariano is not present. Ms. Patello is not present yet. Myself, Jacob Sandoval, I'm here. Andrew Sandoval.
Present.
Okay, and Sarah Turner.
Present.
Okay, so we meet quorum. So if everybody can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we move on to the approval of the board agenda. Can I get is there anything to add, Melissa? Everything's
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Sure. Yeah, is there everything's on the agenda, no changes?
Everything's on the agenda for this evening.
Okay. Can I
I
get
make
a
a
motion?
motion to approve.
Okay, Mr. Motions, can I get a second?
I second.
Okay, can we do,
Okay. We'll do our roll call vote. Mr. Patel is not present. Ms. Ariano is not present. Ms. Turner,
Aye.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
let me see if, actually, we'll adjourn the closed session, then I'll just call Neil again to let us know we're gonna meet there. Can I get a motion to adjourn the closed session?
Motion to adjourn the closed session.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, second. Okay, so roll
Ms.
call.
Ariano isn't present. Mr. Patel is not present. Ms. Turner,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval,
Aye.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, I'll see everybody in closed session.
Hey, Terry.
Hello, how are you doing? Hi, Melissa.
good.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to be back with y'all.
Well, hopefully we're not going to make you wait like we did.
Hey, that's no problem. I know how that goes, especially during COVID, right? All these things come up and, you know, no problem. I have my board meeting Wednesday, so oh, see how that goes. We had to close our high school. We had 10 cases, so we closed our high school for 2 weeks. We're closed for 2 weeks and then we'll open up again. But man, sports were just starting back, right? Cross country and baseball and softball and
No, I had a situation I'm trying to follow up with right now. They'd finally found a space on campus for one of my students, but I don't know which parent he's staying at. So I don't know if the parent who has him knows that, you know, he's supposed to be on campus tomorrow. So I'm sending texts to people like, where's the child? You know?
right. Hey, but you know, like in a small community like mine, someone knows someone that has their number and knows the situation. Oh gosh, it goes like that. Hi, Jacob.
Hey, Terry, how are you?
Good. I'm great. How are you?
Good. Excited about our final session.
I am. I'll tell you what, guys, last time was so good. Like the stories you shared and the conversations we had, super good. I was really excited about it.
I think we're just waiting for Ms. Patel, but I think I'll move forward with just the reporting back. Are we live? Yeah, we're live. There it is. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're reconvening into open session, and we have 2 items to report back for. One is the approval of Tim Ryan's early or leave of absence and also early resignation effective April 4th. And we passed the motion 4-0. And then the second thing that we voted on in closed session was appointing Melissa Alderman as the acting superintendent effective March 1st. Is that correct, Melissa? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so now we move forward. Nicole, was there any public comments that were submitted?
There was one, and we reached out to her, and she would prefer it goes for our session on Wednesday. It relates more to what we're doing on Wednesday.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate that. Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Moving on to 4.0 in the Good Beginnings workshop. So we have Terry here back to help facilitate that.
Hello and welcome. Nicole, do I have the screen share? Hi, Neil.
Let me fix that right now.
Perfect. Seems like we were just together. Get that screen share and then I'll get some.
I think you should have access now, Terry.
Okay. All right, thanks. Yes, I do. Okay. So I wanted to start off last week. We started off on a reflection of why we're doing the work we are, what led us here, what happened in our early life, you know, to make us the person we are today. Tonight, I'd like to start off with this prompt. What has happened in the last year, last March to this March during COVID, that was a challenge, success, or game changer for your district? And what are your reflections on the last year? And new board member, just reflect on the last couple months. So if we could do a quick share around on that, just, you know, what was a challenge, a success, you know, something as a board member you didn't know before it started that now you know, you had that epiphany. Just have a little conversation because we've all been through a lot in the last year. So I'd just like to talk briefly about that. And I'll give you guys about 5 minutes just to think on that and get your reflections together. And congratulations, Melissa.
Thanks, Terry. I
That's
guess this
awesome.
bunch, we like hanging out together, so we'll keep the band together.
Right. Isn't that awesome?
It's pretty awesome.
So excited.
I can go first, Terry.
Okay, go ahead. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with COVID that we saw was just meal distribution.
Mhm.
Initially was just trying to figure out how to hand out meals and stuff. And I think a big success, especially at our district with the staff, is just kind of figuring that out and having different sites and drop offs. And I think also recognizing at times it wasn't just the school sites, but having site locations outside of the school sites where people can pick up meals was, I think, a pretty big success. I mean, we were able to because of the safety issues, but I think the fact that our district thought outside the box with the staff and doing that, I think was a pretty big success.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jacob. And I feel the same way. Like, I was thinking about my reflection as I wrote that, and I was like, you know what? I think it's getting food to the kids that need it. We're such a big geographical area. We had our bus drivers delivering food and hard packets of work. So, it's amazing how during a bad time or a difficult time, everyone comes together to serve the kids. So my reflection was kind of like yours, Jacob. Thank you. Andrew, can we go to you next, please?
Sure. Well, I'm a new board member,
Yes.
but I think probably initially with COVID, it was probably parent engagement. But now, as we move forward, I was really excited to see. I think we probably topped out probably like 110 at the LCAP meeting last night. So that's exciting for me. Or not last night, last week. But I think now that we're and our DLAC was at 40 something, which was great. So I think that was a difficult part, but now it's improving.
That's amazing. I know when I did a professional learning network for California School Boards Association, and that was the most difficult piece. It was on LCAP and engagement. How do you get parents to come? So that is a success, right? Anytime you can get that many parents in one place, that's a success. So thank you for that. I love that. Sarah, can we go to you next, please?
There's been a lot of successes. I really appreciated just incredible staff flexibility and going the extra mile. I mean, there are many classified people that are working out of their regular job description just because something needs to be done right now. And, we signed an agreement with CSEA allowing people to do that. And then, I have a lot of personal friends that are teachers in this district. And, I'm talking to kindergarten people putting their packets together at 10 o'clock at night and, middle school people answering emails. I mean, it's just, I really feel like everybody did whatever they needed to do for the kids. They didn't have to be told. They did it because that's who they are in their basic character.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, at our last session, we talked about ourselves as board members and a governance team being focused on the needs of the students in the district. And it's always a wonderful reflection when we can say that same thing about our staff and everyone involved in the district. And that's one thing I've seen in my district too, is just everyone banding together and doing the best for kids, no matter what, like you said, people are working out of their job description, but they're willing to do it for the kids. So thank you for that reflection. That's very successful, very positive. Hey, Neil, how are you doing? Uh-oh, you're on mute.
Pretty good. I just got done with golf practice, but
Nice.
I'm ready to go. I wanted to share. For me, I think of the challenge this year has presented, and what the greatest thing that hanged over us was uncertainty, and that was we didn't know what was going on. How bad the virus was, how long it's going to be closed, how contagious it is, and so there was a need for stability in terms of the core of our district and flexibility. And that's exactly what Sarah Turner just said. And for me, once again, when I see our great relationship that we're building with our stakeholder groups, as well as admin. And we had people, all the way from top to bottom. I remember Melissa came in for quite a few months, and had to run the show for a little bit, and it was difficult. People were stressed. Yet it's not in the easiest of times that I like to look at our district. It's the most challenging in how well we adapted. And so I'm very pleased at what I saw, because and the other thing is I really want to commend our board. And the reason is we were listening to each other. We had the same concerns, safety first, no matter what. We'll bring back students. Wasn't a financial issue. We had a good amount of reserve where we had the ability to think outside the box if we needed to. So even though it was challenging, I am very pleased as how we have handled it and are continuing to handle it, because of the fact that I think our district did the best in adapting along the way, as I've seen other districts adapt as well. So having said all that, the challenges have really brought out the best in this district.
I love what you said, Neil, because really, during the easy times, if there is such a thing as being a board member during an easy time, but really during the difficult times is when you see the strength of your team, and you all might have different ideas, but you're listening to each other and you're reflecting, you're listening, to each other's perspective to do the best thing you can for the students in the district. So I love that. Thank you, Neil. I appreciate that. Melissa?
It's to kind of talk about what Mr. Andrew Sandoval mentioned about the engagement piece. When this first started, now we were lucky in that we had one-to-one devices and we were able to deploy those early.
Perfect.
But the comfort level of the technology and being able to engage our families, it was really difficult at the end of last year. And we did have over, I think, 110 or 108 people in our LCAP meeting last week, which was amazing. And so and same for our DLAC a couple of weeks before. That was the biggest turnout we'd ever had. And honestly, at this point, almost a year to date of when we had our emergency board meeting to close schools, technology has, as one of my colleagues says, sort of leveled the playing field for a lot of our families. They're able to log into those Chromebooks that we have at home for their students, or they're logging in on their phone. We had a lot of people on their phone for our LCAP meeting. And just the getting people to understand that it goes just beyond you sitting and listening. It's a chance for questions. It's a chance for ideas. So like what we heard in our meeting were people who were concerned about possibly coming back, or people who were concerned about not possibly coming back. And as we discussed it and what the different concerns were, that we are in this together. And so actually, like what was a great challenge last year with just that how do we engage people now that we are required to be at a distance? We had just started getting really good at engaging people in person. And then all of a sudden, we had been having our largest LCAP meetings before that in person. And then so last year, when this first happened, everyone's required to be at a distance, created a great challenge. But almost to the date a year later, here we are. It's now one of our greatest advantages for being able to engage large groups of stakeholders. So that's been one of the more interesting things. And I think just in the ways that we're able to get information out to families now, and that they know where to look for information. It's been really interesting and exciting.
Melissa, that's, really interesting that you said that, because we're having the same thing. Like, we barely would have 5 or 6 parents that would come to our, LCAP meetings or our board meetings. And now, since we're doing it virtually, I think it's available to a lot more people. They don't have to travel. They're able to, join from home. So maybe that is a good thing that we've learned and that has come out of this pandemic, like what are the best ways to reach our stakeholders so they can participate in the meetings that are so important for them. One of the things we did, we have a high percentage of Native American kids in our district. So instead of expecting them, their parents and themselves to come to us, we went to the tribal office. So and that's when we were able to meet in person. So that was one of the strategies that we kind of did, was like, why do we always expect people to come to us? Let's go to them. And now virtually we can go to them in their house. So that makes it all the more easier. So that's wonderful, so that is a good thing that came out of the pandemic. Who would have thought it? Any other reflections or thoughts or comments about this last year, guys?
I think just the biggest thing that I guess you most are mentioning as far as getting people more involved with this virtual world now that we probably wouldn't have thought of, if we would never have closed down. And
right.
that opens up a lot of doors, for possibilities, reaching families and students.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're about to jump into our work again, guys. Let me do the share screen and I will get our draft up. So again, the reason why we're creating this governance handbook is just to get our norms and our protocols and our roles and responsibilities collectively understood. And this is a place where they live. Again, we can use this document for onboarding new board members. And it's a good, it makes us remember our agreements through our norms and protocols. So again, we went through this. I love your philosophy too. I think that is really, really good that you guys have explored that. We went through roles and responsibilities. We talked about how the board is the what and the administration is the how, the superintendent and staff is the how. We went through our 5 pillars of responsibility. We set the direction, we establish a structure, we provide support, we ensure accountability, we serve as community leaders, and we discussed all 5 of those pillars. We went down here, we again dove a little deeper into each one of the pillars and talked about the different aspects of each job. We talked about the board bylaw 9005. Melissa, I'll get with you after this and see if you have a policy that's different than this, and we'll include it in the governance handbook. Some districts just use the template from CSBA, but some change it a little bit. So we'll get with you and get that document in here. We did good work. We went through our governance norms. Again, the norms defined by culture is the positive or negative atmosphere created by the way people in an organization treat each other. Teams have unwritten and written agreements about how they will behave with each other and others. These behavioral ground rules, often called norms, enable teams to build and maintain a positive culture or shift a negative one. So we went through our agreements of, here we go. We went through our agreements. I will get these back to you in the book. I don't think we, did we cover?
Terry, that's where we left off.
Yes, right, that's where we left off. That's right. That's right. Okay, so let's go through these bullets real quick. These are the board meeting agreements, and it's just how we agree to run our meetings, right? So let's go through those bullets real fast. You can reflect on those. We'll talk about ones that we want to keep, ones that we don't want to keep, and maybe ones that we need to create. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to browse through that, and then we will debrief. All right, thumbs up when you're ready. All right, okay. Hey, Sarah, is there one that specifically resonates with you or jumps out at you that you'd really like to have in these agreements?
There was one that I had a question about, and maybe we're going to get to it later, but where it's coming
Okay.
up, just the ask questions for clarification.
Mhm.
Just in terms of, it's always been my understanding as a board member, when we get the agenda, to try to make sure, to ask a question beforehand so that you have that information prepared before you go to the board meeting. And my question sort of is, sort of our norms for who we're asking. Like, are we taking everything to the superintendent, or if it's a technology question, are we asking that department? So just having something established about
Okay.
what is the norm around that, because that's, I don't think it's been a huge problem, but it's just something I'd like clarification on.
Perfect. And we'll address that during protocols, and we'll talk about the way Melissa wants that to work and the way you guys want that to work. Sometimes what we do as board members is we give our questions to the board president, and then she passes it on to the superintendent. Other districts just go straight to staff, which I think that could be a little messy sometimes. So maybe, when we start talking about the protocol, you guys think about if you want it to go through your board president or you want the questions to go directly to Melissa. So when we get to that protocol, we'll be talking about that. But one reason why it's in here is just what you said, Sarah, getting clarification before the meetings. Some board members do that gotcha thing to staff, which is hard, right? No one likes to be embarrassed. Everyone likes to be prepared. So I think that's why, this is listed as a bullet, but we are definitely going to talk about that protocol, which is very important, right? We need to know the rules of the game so we don't make mistakes or, make people uncomfortable. Sometimes when board members go straight to staff for questions, the staff is like, whoa, I'm going to give that to my superintendent, because they don't want to step on any toes or say the wrong thing. So we will definitely talk about that protocol. Thank you for bringing it up, Sarah. I appreciate that. Andrew, or Sarah, did you have anything else that stood out for you, or something you think maybe we need to add, or?
I didn't have any additions.
Okay.
I did appreciate the emphasis on professionalism and treating people with respect. Like, there was just, I thought a lot of the bullets were really strong in terms of, having a basis of respect in everything that we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Sarah. Andrew, did any of the bullets stand out to you, or would you like to add anything, or does this cover most things, do you think?
Sure. Well, Neil might agree or make a side comment on this, but where it says address what issues, and it says we ensure the superintendent administration will handle the how or implementation issues. Right. I'm a big fan of input, so just to give you an idea, like community engagement. We had a really good DLAC meeting, and the vice principal's name just slipped my mind. But, he beat me to the punch. But when we reopened, it's like a suggestion I would have had would be to bring food to these meetings, because it happens around dinner time, right? So right here, the on how the implementation kind of, I don't want to say it bothers me, but it kind of does, because we're not, it seems like maybe we shouldn't input on how something gets done. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would say, well, I would recommend that, or, some school districts maybe don't have certain documents translated in Spanish. So I would say, if we're going to do this, we should also prepare that, things like that. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, so what this means is, and let's take the Spanish documents, for example. So the board would say, as a policy, all these documents need to be in Spanish for our Spanish speaking stakeholders, right? So the staff would make that not make the decision, but they would do the how, right? They would prepare the documents. They would make sure the parents got the documents. So we're making the big decision as board members to say, we want this. And then staff takes it from there and says, okay, we're going to, you know, when we come to these LCAP meetings, we're going to have everything translated in Spanish. We're going to have all these documents prepared. And so that's kind of an example of, you know, that we do the what of saying that we want the documents in Spanish, and they do the how of implementation and getting those documents to the parents. Does that make sense?
It kind of does. Just like, but on the other hand, just like I would say recommend food, but we're not going to have like a policy on taco trucks. You know what I mean?
No.
So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's what I'm kind of saying. But
Mhm.
you know, that's the only thing that I think I'm a little concerned with that. So you know, it just
Yeah. But that could definitely be a suggestion. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like as a
So-
board, that's not a big thing. I mean, as long as all of you guys agree on it and say, you know what? Food brings people together. It always does. And it makes people come to our meetings sometimes, you know? So
Mhm.
food is always actually, that's one of the things that came out of our 2-year LCAP study was if you provide food, you get many more people at your meeting. So, you know, that is a valid point there. So yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. Andrew, that's not like going into a site, preparing the food and giving it to the parents. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You're just saying it would be nice to provide food at some of these meetings. So I don't think there's a problem with that. Melissa, your reflection on that?
I can give a great example.
Okay.
Mr. Sandoval is the one who suggested that he was interested in exploring having simultaneous translation for our board meeting.
Mhm.
So what I did is we spent a lot of time researching, calling, test driving different ways to do this, reached out to other districts, how they did it. So the how that I've arranged is going to happen first on Wednesday night, where we have actually a local interpretation service who will be a call-in number. So someone can still be watching our board meeting, but hearing the simultaneous translation. And so what I did was I found someone local who's already translating these kinds of meetings as a firm, and they've connected us with the translator. We're going to test drive that this Wednesday. Then we can determine if that worked well for us, or if that's not working well for us, then we can look at what we want to do moving forward. That would be an example of the what and the how that worked, right?
That's a perfect example, right? So Andrew didn't go find the company and set it up for the school district,
Right.
but he had the big idea of let's have translation services.
Mhm.
So
I
does
see.
that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you.
Boy, let me know how that works. That's amazing. That would be a
We
gift.
left out with it a Salinas company too, who is a local interpreting service. So we always like to support local businesses if we can. So
Yes.
hopefully it's going to go well.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. I'm glad to hear that. And, you know, I might steal that little piece for my district. It works well. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Any other reflections, Andrew, on any of the bullets?
I think they're pretty straightforward.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Hey, Neil, can I pick on you now?
Well, everybody else does. Why not?
In a good way, in a good way. Do any of the bullets resonate with you, or is there something you'd like to add, something missing?
The one thing that really stuck to me about our board is right there where it says, acknowledge that the majority rules and be supportive of this decision. I think one of the greatest weaknesses any board has is when they break apart and they present different perspectives, different ideas, different visions, if you will, that isn't being followed through with, if you will, through the policies. So, you know, how do we get to our decisions? You know, we like to get there hopefully through unanimous vote. And to get there, you know, we are very respectful. We try to find out why somebody supports an issue. Give me some background, give me your perspective, you know, and also compromising, you know. ultimately, nothing's going to get done if everyone only wants what's theirs and not everybody else's, so but this idea of having a board that is supportive of each other, I've been around long enough, and I'm sure Sarah would agree that there's a long history of boards going crazy, for lack of a better word, on each other. And
That's a good word.
the only one paying is the students and staff.
Right.
They're the ones who have to live with that, and the bad decisions and the rift in the community. So for me, it's always this idea of, hey, let's get to accept the whatever the vote was, but at the same time be supportive of it, even if it goes against what you wanted. Ultimately we have to show a uniform face to the public and stakeholders.
You're right, Neil. And what way do we show our thought or our viewpoint? It's by our vote. But sometimes we happen to be in the minority, and we definitely have to join, for when we leave that boardroom, the decision that was made by the majority, we have to support, right? Otherwise, our governance team can fall apart really easy. And it's hard to make that transition sometimes from the I to the we. And I think you heard me talk about that last time, was how we have to talk through that collaborative voice. But you're right, Neil, if a board goes out of that room and says, well, I didn't vote that way and I don't support that, it is so damaging to a district because it's confusing to staff, right? And especially to your superintendent. So you've taken a vote, you've decided on an issue, and now people are like leaving that piece of the team, right? They're like, well, I didn't, so how does the superintendent work with that board when people are going outside of that room and not supporting the decisions made? That makes it really difficult. So thank you for bringing that up, because, and I've been seeing a lot of that lately on boards. Maybe it's people are more political, or, they're younger, and, different dynamic, different demographics of people getting on boards. But it's really important to support the majority. So thank you for bringing that up. Neil, is there any other ones that kind of resonate with you, or maybe you'd like to add?
You're on mute.
Yeah, I think it always comes down to the basic understanding of respect and courtesy, whether it be, students, staff, fellow board members, community, that goes a long ways. I might disagree with you, but I'm gonna let you speak. I'm gonna hear you out. At some point I might cut you off because I gotta go, but the point is I'm gonna listen, that's my job. I mean, sometimes I get parents who call me and they tell me exactly how they feel. And sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't. But, bottom line is as long as you maintain that level of respect, it's easier to get things done. And a lot of times, people want to be heard. It's not necessarily, they feel like my voice is not being heard and no one's considering it. So sometimes you got to take the good with the bad, and it all comes out at the end.
Yeah, and I think we talked about listening a little bit last time. Like, are you listening to respond, or are you listening to understand? And really having that attitude of, I want to understand when you're talking about your other board members, or if you're talking about your superintendent, just listening to get that understanding is so important. Thank you, Neil, for that. I appreciate that. Jacob, do you have any reflections on these bullets?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think one for me is that always reminds me is students' need and priorities drive our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I always repeat that to myself whenever I catch myself getting lost in the weeds of things. It's like, hey, everybody's goals, whether it's a superintendent, staff, the board, it's like, as long as we keep reminding ourselves, like, that's the reason why we're doing that, and look at the bigger picture. And then also, I think the majority rules. I think when I did the CSBA training, I know there was a couple of board members from different districts that were kind of feeling like their voice might get lost in there.
Yep.
But I reflected on that, and I think for me, it's not that your voice gets lost, but once a decision is made, there's more decisions to be made in the future. So if you're still stuck or dwelling on a specific issue that didn't go your way, you might lose sight or the opportunity to engage the other board members on other issues that are important, because that's kind of almost creating like a blockage for people. And that's where kind of divisiveness amongst boards comes on, is when
Yes.
at like a bigger picture look. So I think for me, every so often, you know, when we kind of get into the long readings or the stressfulness, to kind of just remind myself, you know, students' needs are first, and that's the priority, and that should always be our driving decision. And the second is, you know, I mean, we've been, you know, blessed that we don't have, we haven't had any decisions besides when Neil votes no to adjourn the meeting, but where we don't vote in the majority, and which is good. But I'm sure I always told Neil when I first came on the board is, you know, I'm sure there's going to be a time where me and you are not seeing eye to eye, you know. Once we move past that and we'll work on the next item together, then, you know, that's totally okay, you know. And I think that's what I ask of all the board members. It's like, hey, even if we don't see eye to eye on one particular item, like, let's get past that, and the next one let's work on together, and maybe we'll work on that issue. You know?
Yeah, and that's a great attitude, Jacob. And especially in your position as board president, that's really our job, to let everyone speak their piece, right? Make sure that everyone has a voice and no one's, you know, being discarded, or, you know, everyone feels important on the team. So yeah, that's a really important point. And here's the deal. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but we still have respect for each other. And that's really, really, really important. And I think it models good leadership for your students in your district, for your staff, you know, for everyone, even in the community. You know, they're going to see times when you vote differently, but it's never out of disrespect. And it's always respectful debate that goes on between the board members. So that's really important. Thank you for that. Anything you'd like to add, Jacob, that you think we missed?
No, nothing that I can think of. I think the biggest thing is, it just reminded me of, I attended a board president workshop or training put on, I think it was by, I'm not sure it was CSBA or training. And it was interesting because one of the board presidents made a comment like, do I have to let him do that? And I thought to myself, like, yes, like, you know, as much as you may not agree with what other board member is doing, you know, your goal is to kind of keep the meetings going forward, kind of create some consensus and making sure everybody feels valued. Because if you don't, then that one person that you're putting to the side can cause disruptions in the functioning of the district and the relationships and stuff.
Oh my gosh. And that's so true, right? Like, if you shut them down and don't let them have their voice, guess what? That's just going to fester, and they're going to be the outlier of your board, you know? And when people don't feel heard, you know, it causes problems, and they'll take that to the next issue and the next issue and the next issue. Like you were talking about, Jacob, with Neil, like sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't agree, but on to the next issue. But when people feel that they haven't been heard or discarded, they're going to bring that way into the future, you know, in future discussions. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important that we recognize that. Very good. Melissa, your reflections on these bullets, is there anything that you see that maybe we need to add or discuss?
No, they're all really straightforward. And I think it's really about keeping the communication channels open and honest, and that we all know what we're here for ultimately, of course, are the students. And so I thought these were pretty succinct in what they outlined for us. And then, you know, some other details once we get into our protocols.
Yes, perfect. All right. Any reflections on this section? If not, we will move on to our next piece. Okay. All right, here are the protocols. And what I'll do is we'll discuss the protocols, and then I'll go back and make sure that they're not against your board bylaws, right? So the board bylaws that you have, I'll browse those after we go over this and make sure our decisions don't conflict with the board bylaws. So what are governance team protocols? These are the following processes: guide the operation of the governance team and determine how they do business. Protocols are the agreement that ensure that all members of the team are operating within their agreed upon roles. So the first one we're going to talk about is no votes or abstentions. And Andrew, could you read that one for us? The no votes or abstentions?
Sure. When a member of the governing board casts a no vote or abstains from voting on a particular issue, as a courtesy, the member may offer a short statement as to the reason for their action.
Okay, so I changed this word. It used to say will, and I wanted to soften it a little bit because I feel like, and this is under your discretion. We can change it back to will or keep it may. I didn't want to put people on the spot if they didn't want to explain their no vote, right? But they definitely have the opportunity of that. Abstentions, during my 24 years of being a school board member, I've never had to abstain. Usually that's due to a conflict of interest. And so, you know, as board members, we don't need to use that abstention to get out of difficult votes, right? We're there to make a decision and to vote. And it probably hasn't been a problem in your district, but some boards have had that problem when, you know, things get tight or difficult, board members abstain from the vote. And I just feel that, you know, we're elected to make these decisions and it's important that we do. Any reflections on this one by the team?
Well, I agree. I've heard that before too, is don't abstain. You know, you're there for elected, you know, somebody voted you in or appointed you in order to be a vote and make a decision. So if you abstain because you have a conflict of interest, and you know, you're kind of doing disservice to the people, the community you're kind of serving.
Exactly. And the conflict of interest, it's outlined and usually in the board bylaws of what constitutes a conflict of interest, and mainly it's financial. But sometimes if as board members, we get involved with a grievance or a problem at the lowest level, you know, get involved with the parents or the staff and get in the middle of the problem instead of like giving them space to, you know, go through the chain of command. We might have to abstain at the end if we've inserted ourselves into that situation, right? So that's why it's important that we have people, you know, follow that chain of command. And as board members, we can listen, but we can't promise outcomes. And I think that's really important to make that distinction. So
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes,
Sarah
yes.
Turner is having a little bit of technical difficulty, so Nicole Jensen is going to kick her out of this meeting and attempt to allow her to join back in. Could we
Okay.
maybe take a break for a couple of minutes while we work that out for her?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you really, really well.
Oh, good. If you saw me pick up the phone, my screen went black and I couldn't access anything on the screen. Like I just had a white arrow
Oh my
cursor, but I
goodness.
couldn't click on anything. So I thought I could hear you guys perfectly. I thought, well, this is gonna be really embarrassing when somebody asks me what I think and I can't express an opinion because I can't unmute myself.
Oh my gosh. Hey, this is what our kids and teachers go through all the time, huh? This gives us empathy for what they face all the time.
It does. So I walked around my house turning the Wi-Fi off on like Kindles, cell phones, anything that I thought might be taking the bandwidth, I turned it off. So
Right,
hopefully
right.
we'll do a little better.
And what was funny, we could see you. It didn't go black on our side, so we could still see you. I don't know. I just know I love the technology people because they're fixers. They fix our stuff. They fix our meetings. So, okay, let's go on. And I'm glad you're back, Sarah. Thank you. We got that fixed. So the next one we're going to talk about is the
Terry, really quick.
Oh,
Neil,
yes.
are you back as well, Neil?
Excuse me, what?
I was checking to see if Neil's back.
Oh, is he back? I didn't see. He's not.
Yeah,
on.
I think might somebody on a break, I think.
Okay, let's give him a couple minutes.
Well, Terry, I'll ask
Yes.
about the weather where you're at. How's the weather?
So I was in my district this weekend and it was cold and snowy. And now I come back down here to Sacramento and it's a little cool, but not bad, right? I'm used to that 4,000 mountain weather, you know, so it doesn't feel too cold to me here. How's Salinas?
It was interesting. It got a little chillier today. We started out a little bit warmer and I felt like it kept dropping a little bit during the day. Partly cloudy.
Uh-huh. Oh gosh, that's such a beautiful area. I mean, the agriculture in California is just amazing. My dad had a dairy and grapes just below Fresno, you know, and when they talk about California being the breadbasket of the world, I can certainly vouch for that. I grew up in that situation. So
Now,
really,
what's funny for me is where I grew up down south, my grandfather was a strawberry farmer
oh wow, where at?
in the southeast in Florida.
Uh-huh.
And here I am back in the middle of strawberry fields.
Yes. And you know what's funny, Melissa, is so Driscoll's is up in our area, in our school district. And what they do is they grow the baby plants up where we are because there's no fungus or no anything. And then they move them down to you guys and plant the plants for the strawberries. So yeah, we have certain similarities in our school district, right? Is Neil back?
I think we're all back.
Okay, all right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of similarities between your school district and mine. So I'd love to see that. Okay, we talked about no votes and abstentions and why it's not a good thing to abstain, right? And so our next thing we're going to talk about is agree to disagree. And really this goes back to the respect aspect of, having debates, talking about issues. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes just to read that and then we'll talk about it. So this really is just talking about what we talked about a few minutes ago about supporting the majority of the team, being respectful. The board listens to all perspectives, right? I think I told the story about when I was first on the board, I would, make my votes and write them down, and how I learned not to do that, to listen to my other board members and their perspective and how important that is. you guys have any reflections on this? Is there any language you would like to change? Does it make sense to you?
I liked the language, and I also liked people being supportive. You know, we had a situation when I was first a board member 5 years ago that we were going in a different direction, and one of the board members didn't think it was going to be successful, but never said a word publicly, you know, just said in closed session, like, I don't think this is going to work out, but you know, let's try it. And then it worked out beautifully, and nobody was more excited than that person. You know, like they were so excited that it worked, rather than sort of ill wishing it. You know,
Right.
it didn't need to be their idea because it helped kids.
Sarah, that's a great example. I love that example, right? Like that's really, really, really important. You don't, you know, oh, just because I'm not agreeing with that, I don't want it to fail. But that person was mature about the decision, you know, even though they were on the other side of the vote probably, but they still supported the decision. So that's a great example. Thank you for jumping in there. Jacob, did you have something to add on this one?
No, I like what Sarah had mentioned as far as, you know, even if we ever come to a point where, you know, the way the direction the board decides to take on an action or whatever the item is we want it to succeed, because at the end of the day, it's going to affect kids. And
Right.
And I think that's, even if we went and voted against it and we're in agreement, it's like, hey, money's going to be spent, resources, staff time, and it's going to affect students. So at the end of the day, we want it to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. And going to what Andrew said, you know, and I know it's important to all board members, but, you know, Andrew has a passion for making sure that, you know, we're being inclusive, right? And so I like the piece where, you know, we talk to students in all facets of the community to get their input, and then we make our decision, you know. That's a good piece. I think when I read that, I thought of you, Andrew. All right. Any other reflections on this section? Andrew or Neil? Okay. All right. So now we go to agenda development. So a lot of times the agenda is developed by the board president and the superintendent. Sometimes they bring a third member into that meeting. It can be the clerk, but also it could be another board member, you know, just to build their capacity and see what it looks like to sit in on that meeting. And the rotation is kind of a good idea, right? Bringing a different person. It's always usually the superintendent and the board president, but that third person can be chosen from the governance team, right? Melissa, how do you guys do it? I know you're brand new, but this is a good thing to talk about, right? We can get it clear on how the board and, you know, yourself wants that to look like. So what does it look like right now?
Well, I am brand new, and so kind of setting our practice together, like Jacob is my current board president, and so ideally, even like virtually, before we publish our agenda, at least he and I would have a meeting about the agenda and say, is this covering all the things that we want to make sure that we put on the next meeting? Or is there something that we wanted to put on the one after that, and so it doesn't need to be on this? And that we're able to have that discussion before publication. So I'd like for us to set our protocol on that, and like what that would look like with my board president whenever we build our agenda. So, you know, we take into consideration there's always the standard things that need to be on an agenda, or it's on an annual timeline that, you know, we've got the second interim budget report. And so that's definitely going on, right?
Right.
But then sort of those other things for discussion that we want to put on, or that if a board member requested something at the prior meeting, that we're putting that in, or that something has come up in the community that they know we want to put that on, that he and I have a set meeting where we can certainly engage and kind of go over the agenda draft while it's still in the draft phase, and then put it out for publication.
Okay. How does the rest of the board feel like that? Is that working well for you guys now, the way it's the way you're doing it?
I'll go first, and then Neil can have his hand up.
Okay. Go ahead, Neil.
Okay. First of all, when I read that first sentence, personally, I would like to strike out the part where it says, any member of the government's team. I would like to strike out employee or citizen has a right to place items on it. That is not true. I believe that we have a representational form of our of power, and that at any time, employees, stakeholder groups, public citizens, other members of our community can at any time contact a board member. If a board member feels strong enough that that item needs to be brought forward as an agenda item, that is up to that board member through their representation of that of their stakeholder group. So for me, that term, any member of governance team is great, you know, but employee or citizen has a right to place items, that I would strike. The other thing I would ask as a discussion point, Diego and Sarah, is in certain organizations, you know, whether it be city council or school board, normally, you know, it would take 1 or 2 board members to support it in order for it to be put on the agenda, you know, so in other words, you need at least 2. I would support that in the sense that if you can at least get one person to at least hear you out, then what chance does it have to even, you know, even get to a point of passing a vote or even get consideration? So just 2 points I wanted to bring forward. One was it's any member of the governance team can has a right. It is not employee or citizen. And secondary is, you know, consider adding that it would take 2, at least 2 board members to agree on something before it would be put on the agenda. But that is something to consider. I'm not here, you know, demanding that. I'm just saying that's a consideration for the rest of the board.
Great point. And Neil, sometimes what happens on your agenda, Andrew, I'll get to you right just in a second. On your agenda at the end, do you have a place that says future agenda items where people can suggest, okay, I have that on my agenda too. And that's a good place where you could, you know, bring something up as a board member to get it on. But also, I think a good practice is if, you know, like 2 people are like, yeah, let's talk about that. Bring that issue as an information item, right? And then the whole board can kind of make the decision if you want to go forward, and then it will come back as a discussion item and then an action item. So that's been a good practice because it gives everyone the decision-making power of, you know what, do we really want to tackle this? So great points, Neil, and I'll reflect that in this paragraph if everyone else agrees. So Andrew?
Oh, sorry, just oh, go ahead, Jacob.
No, I was going to say this actually got brought up as a discussion point on when I did the board president. I think it was actually Smith who put it on.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this, but apparently the public can request for an item to be on the agenda. I guess legally speaking, which kind of blew my mind. I heard this.
Request. They have a right to request, but they don't have a right to place.
Okay, but we can double, because I think one thing that the board president had said was like, do I have to put it on the public request? And I will check with council, but I think the presentation, I think had mentioned that they'll put it on the agenda, but if nobody on the board says anything, then it kind of just dies out, is kind of what the representative from Smith kind of had mentioned. But I agree with you, Neil, as far as that's the way I would like it for it. We just got to make sure, like legally with council, that's what it is and stuff.
Yeah, check with council. It's always good to do that. But yeah, it has to be under our jurisdiction, right? Yeah. It can't be like, I think I talked to you guys about the trap shooting team that was going to be started at our in our school district, and then all of a sudden it started a discussion on gun rights. Well, we don't have any jurisdiction over that. We can't put that on the agenda because we don't make those decisions. So really making sure that the issues that are brought up are under our governance, you know. But yeah, I'll get you some more information on that too, Jay.
Yeah, I think the other part I was going to mention was, I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to have the Good Beginnings workshop. And it's interesting, life happens, because Melissa came in right when we're having the good beginnings and setting protocols, which is
Yeah,
because it's going to set us up for more success. Because I think once we're going through this, there wasn't a lot of written policies as getting.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I agree with Melissa was saying. I think I do want to set up that practice where, right, either on the day the agenda comes out, we do have
okay,
a quick Zoom, just kind of go through it. I know I had brought this up to Sarah a couple of years back, that sometimes there was one meeting where things was kind of put out as a surprise for us. And so I think if obviously we have that open communication, how Melissa was saying that there's always that open dialogue,
mhm,
it kind of alleviates how the meetings kind of progress and stuff. So I think for agenda development, I don't know what the rest of the board is and Melissa, as far as we set it up at, like on a Friday, whoever the board president is at that point, because just to remind people, we're setting this up just not for me and Melissa, but as a policy for whoever's board president in the future and going forward.
exactly. Exactly. And you know what? This is a perfect time to do this workshop because Melissa is brand new and you guys are creating these protocols and, you know, it's going to benefit you because everyone knows the rules of the road, right? So yeah,
You know,
great idea.
it would be, I think it would be in our best interest. We always publish the agenda on, you know, like by the Friday before our meeting so that we've got
Exactly.
the ample posting time.
Mhm.
And so what we do, it would be definitely including my board president in
Mhm.
the draft review process where we're still looking and saying, okay, oh, wait, there's one more item. We've got to add this on this meeting and doing that and engaging in that. And that way, you know, we're following our protocols and making sure that our board members through our board president are able to say, oh, okay, oh, we're going to wait and do that at the next meeting, or, oh, we're going to move it forward and do this at this meeting. You know, when something comes up at the end of a meeting where someone wants to add something to the agenda, that we've got our process and my board as a whole has their representative in their board president, right?
Yes, I think that's really important. And I think that's a good practice, you know. Andrew, did you have something to add?
I think everybody covered it now, but
Okay,
good. Lozano Smith does have a brief on attaching items for the public. I've actually used that ed code at a school district, and they did place an item on the agenda. So
Okay.
before we change that,
yeah,
I did not know that, Andrew. That's that's something I need to learn. So if we can get
Yeah, no worries.
clarification from legal, I'd really like to see that.
yeah, perfect.
I think for this one here, so do we need to type it in as far as like Terry in the future? So, and I think it would be a good idea. I don't know what Melissa, your thoughts are, if it would just be the board president, or if you think the vice president, given the option to be
Okay.
there as well, or we should just focus on, you know.
If we do, yeah, the president and with invitation, one more board member, like if something, you know, big is coming up or like about the development or something, and we want to make sure that the board member who's on our facilities committee had a chance to review an item, you know, that we'd have the option of inviting a second board member.
So the piece that I just highlighted, does that cover what you're thinking about, the content that you want, Jacob, and the rest of the board?
Yeah, but what does the rest of the board feel? I think I'm in agreement. I think it's good to have that cycle in there,
Okay,
because that
Yeah.
board might be present in the future. So
I like the idea of, you know, having the cycle of the superintendent and the board president working together, and then the option that, again, you maybe one other person, if, again, facilities committee or some, you know, somebody who has an expertise in a certain
Yeah.
area.
perfect. And do you guys have a governance calendar? I'll send you a copy, Melissa, so you can see. The governance calendar is really good. So what that does is it kind of outlines your whole year, and a board member can look and say, oh, in April, we're going to be discussing this. And, you know, so they can see what future items are coming up. So when I edit this and send it back to you, I'll send you a governance calendar. So you guys can just take a peek at that. It's also good to put your professional development on for the board, you know, just to outline what you're going to be doing during the year. It's just an organizational tool. So I will definitely send that to you guys. Okay, and we'll check out the legal language too on that.
So are we adding the words with the support of a second board member?
So
Or is that-
we have the board member may invite one more board member to be included in the agenda development.
No,
So
just
does
because
that-
Neil had discussed kind of in order to get the item on the agenda that it would be supported by one. So I'm just wondering if we
Okay.
need to include that language in there.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
I agree with Neil. I think if it means
Okay,
that two people to support something for it to have a chance of getting passed.
okay,
And Terry, we can certainly reach out to our legal counsel just to make sure that whatever
Okay.
we're putting in there
Mhm.
about the adding items generated by the public
Mhm.
are definitely that our language falls in line with
Perfect.
legal requirements.
Okay. Yeah, you know, it's always good because here's the deal. The laws are changing so fast, especially during COVID, and they've made different, you know, being virtual and how those meetings look and the legal aspects of it. They've made changes. So it's really important to stay on top of that with your attorney. So thank you, Melissa, for talking about that. All right. Does that cover agenda, guys? Okay, perfect. Okay, so this one, I'm okay. I'm so about. It's a little bit confusing. So it's talking about the criteria for evaluating programs. So I'm going to read this one just so we get a little bit of an understanding on it. So it says Santa Rita Union School District is dedicated to developing quality programs that serve the needs of our students. While we value our employees and their contributions, we use objective criteria to evaluate programs, courses, and personnel. We take the process used by our staff seriously. We recognize that the process used must place the needs of the students and district first. The criteria must include fiscal accountability as well as program integrity. So this is one, and jump in, Melissa, if you have reflections on this one. This is just saying that we trust our staff to give us success indicators for the programs, you know, that are being done with our students in our district. You know, of course, as board members, we're not going to go into that program, sit down in the Title I program and, you know, do an evaluation. We depend on our staff and their professionalism and their knowledge to give us a yes or a no if it's working, right? And this kind of makes me think of the whole LCAP process when you're talking to students and the professionals in your district, the teachers, the administrators, to really dive deep and see if the programs are working for the children like you want them to work. So this is my reflection on this. Melissa, after reading this, does that make sense to you on this criteria for evaluating programs?
No, it definitely does. And I appreciate the last line about that it must include the fiscal accountability and the program integrity. That anytime we're evaluating any of our programs on a small scale or a large scale, that we're definitely keeping an eye out on the fiscal impact of them in relation to evaluating them.
Okay, perfect. Any questions or comments from the board on this? Okay. All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is anonymous information. So this is just kind of redirecting people when they have complaints to go to the complaint procedure that you use in your district. Usually it's identified on your website that there's a link where you can click and get straight to that complaint procedure. But if not, they can go to the district office and pick up that document to fill out. Oh, Placer Hills. I'll get that out of there. So yeah, that's what this is talking about. And, you know, it's just talking about also being careful of anonymous information. You know, like a lot of times people will share problems with you as board members and say, don't use my name. I don't want anything to come back on me. Well, we have to encourage people to take ownership of that process and, you know, talk to the principal, talk to the teacher. Next, we'll be talking about the chain of command, but really having them honor the system that you use in your district. Any reflections on that, Melissa or board members?
No, I think that's great because anytime at any level, the whole time I've been here, we discourage the anonymous complaint because it prohibits us from, you know, getting more information from someone, from following up with them when they do that. And so we always discourage the anonymous complaint, but not necessarily completely ignore it, right? Because
Right.
sometimes a complaint comes in
Yeah.
that it has to be taken very seriously, even though it's anonymous. But so we try to discourage the anonymity piece where possible.
Right, perfect. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to ignore it. And also, the board members are your eyes and ears out in the community, you know? So if something happens, I was home in my district and a teacher in the grocery store, always in the grocery store, was talking about one of her concerns, you know, with virtual learning, right? And so I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And so I gave that information to my superintendent just so he had a heads up about what was going on at that school site, right? So I think communication is really important. And Melissa, I'm sure that you want to know what's going on, you know, if the board members hear of certain things going on that you want them to communicate that to you. Board, do you have any examples of when that's happened to you where, you know, you've been told something about an issue and what you've done with that information?
Yeah,
I do. I just had that, but it's a learning experience. So yeah, I appreciate the guidance and the way it works.
Perfect. Perfect. And we're all learning together, right? That's why we have these workshops and that's why we talk about these protocols is we're learning together. So thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that.
Well, it
Oh.
actually, it made me think of kind of a funny situation when a middle school student had presented a situation to her mother that was not in fact the policy of that middle school as being the policy. And I just happened to know that that wasn't true. So I had to, you know, bring the kid in and say, oh, it's my understanding that it's actually this. And she had to admit to her mother that yes, that she had sort of created her own policy the way that she wanted it to be. So just trying to, you know, make sure that accurate, you know, if accurate information gets back to the parent, you know, so they know what's actually happening.
Yeah, and that's part of our job, right? Is to give the correct information to the parents, either on how they can put a complaint procedure in, you know, if they have a complaint that they want to file. And then it goes to the language too, Andrew, I would think, you know, how do the parents do it if they're, you know, only speaking Spanish? You know, is there like a translation service for that complaint procedure? Do they know that they're able to do that? I'm sure that goes through your DLAC, like that information gets to your parents, but just being mindful of, you know, and being inclusive of every parent is able to, you know, put in that complaint procedure or complaint if they want to. Okay. All right, so now we come to the chain of command. And this, I'll tell you what, if I could put stars and bells and whistles and everything next to this one, this is really important, right? Is just, and a lot of times your stakeholders don't know about the chain of command. They think, well, you're a board member, I'm just gonna tell you the problem and we're gonna get it fixed that way, right? But jumping teachers and principals and superintendents can really be deadly to a district because chaos just happens, because staff doesn't know, do I handle this? Does the board handle this? So really talking about this is important. So I'm going to read it real quick. We recognize that the governance board of trustees has only one employee, the superintendent. We value the chain of command for our district. We will redirect our stakeholders to the correct person to speak about situations in which they wish to speak about. That's a lot of abouts. I might change that a little bit. But yeah, so that's the gist of that. Just making sure that as board members, if a parent has a problem with a teacher, that they've talked to that teacher, and not that we want to shift responsibility or not address it, but we have to address it in the correct way. And again, going back to the first thing that we talked about, if we get involved on that lower level, we might have to abstain from the vote if it comes to us at the very top level. So that's just what that's talking about. All right, any comments or questions on that? Okay. All right, and then this just goes a little bit deeper into the complaint and inquiry reporting, right? Just to facilitate the flow of information, we will adopt an agreed upon format for sharing complaints, concern, praise, and inquiries from the staff and public. We agree that we will inform the superintendent of all complaints or public inquiries and request that they inform us of outcome of complaint or inquiry. If any member of the governance team becomes aware of an issue or problem at a school site or program location, they will immediately inform the superintendent. We are a team. We choose to support our team by sharing information and working cooperatively to address issues. Does that make sense? Any comments
so
or
I
questions?
have a comment on that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I think, and the reason why to have this conversation is, I think even for myself and to the rest of the board members, is I think bringing things up to now Melissa before the board meeting. I know I made a mistake a couple times of. And part of it is just me not knowing the procedure or the process of not surprising people is, when an issue comes up beforehand, I would be like, oh, I'm going to bring that up at the board meeting. And I think a more correct way to do it is bringing it up to the superintendent first, and then the issue gets resolved. And then, and then after that communication takes place, if you do want to bring it up at the board meeting, let the superintendent know, like, hey, I just want to bring it up so people know that I addressed it and that there was a resolution. And so that way, the superintendent and staff knows ahead of time, like, hey, we brought this up. I'm going to bring it up, but only just to let people know that I followed up with it more than anything. So that was one big learning experience for myself. And I think part of the reason why I think initially maybe I didn't bring it up was I think also having that that feeling that you can go up to the superintendent and also bring up those issues, and feel like you'll be heard and not have to bring it up in a public setting.
Perfect. Perfect. Melissa, does that work for you?
So certainly, like in this section, and I'll know we're going to talk about like individual board members when they have questions about things later, but when there's like a complaint or a concern or an issue, for me, the sooner I know about it, the better. I know I had a board member reach out to me because they noticed some water issues in front of one of our sites. And so my remedy for that, to make sure that he had the information, was to actually put him in contact with my director of MOT, who could absolutely explain what the issue was and why that water existed. And I appreciated that because I wasn't aware of the water. But my director of MOT was. We were still in transition at that point, but it's just a current example of something where somebody could have called him and said, hey, it looks like there might be a leak. I believe he happened to have driven by it himself, but in the event, I wouldn't ever want a board member to feel like they needed to wait in the meeting to bring up a concern when, what if that needed to be handled right away? So yeah, the sooner I know, the better. And definitely, like, if it's something that we need to put like a discussion item on the agenda to be like, this concern came up, we want to make sure that our public is aware that it came up and that it was addressed. then
Mhm.
that's something we can definitely do.
Right. I love that, Melissa. I love how that communication loop works, right? Because not only are we, looking at these issues for ourselves, but we're making sure that our stakeholders and our public know that we're looking at the issue and trying to decide on best how to handle it, right? And what the conclusion was. So does that sound good to the board? Does that work for the board? We're getting a lot of clarification on a lot of important things. I think this is really good. Okay. All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is confidentiality. And, again, super important. We want to help people. We want to have conversations. We want to explain ourselves. But there's just sometimes that we're not able to do that. And that's anything that happens in closed session, negotiations. And we're not trying to be secretive. It's just how the organization works, right? That we're able to talk about negotiations, personnel, students, litigation, and things like that in private, right? And we don't break that confidence. That's the only thing we talk about in closed session. But just making sure that we're not having that information get out, because it can kill us in negotiations. Or I think I told the story about a district was looking at buying a school site, and the information got out of closed session, the property that we're looking at, and the property went up like $100,000. So, there's ways that money can be spent that are good for students, and there's ways that money can be spent that aren't so good for students, right? And by bringing that information out of closed session, it really hurt that district. So just making sure that everything stays confidential, and really you guys have that trust. It's hard if you're in closed session and you have a feeling that things are getting out of closed session. It's hard to be your honest self, right? And have those really important conversations that you need to have in closed session. Any reflections on closed session or questions? Does this content fit what you think should be said about closed session?
Yeah, I think it does. Just to kind of reiterate what you're saying is, us having that the trust to be able to have those conversations in a closed session and not feeling like information was. So I appreciate that in our board, that everybody kind of understands that, and we can have those conversations, because I think if information were ever to get leaked, that's obviously only meant for closed session, it could kind of erode the trust between board members if we don't feel like we have that space, to talk about, very confidential issues or that can come up.
Right. And it's hard, because as board members, we're leaders or we wouldn't be serving on the board, right? So we want to fix things, but sometimes when we get involved, like, in negotiations is a good example. If we get involved with negotiations, we can really mess things up, right? Because we don't need any side negotiations away from the table with board members. That can really hurt, right? So making sure that your team is doing the negotiations, but you're told in closed session what's going on, and in the end you approve those contracts. So that's our role in negotiations. Any other questions? Melissa, would you like to add anything to that? Okay, perfect. Okay, so next, I'm going to ask you guys a question. What does it look like when you want to visit a school site? I mean, now we're not really able to do that so much, but when you were able to visit school sites, maybe from some of the senior board members, what does that protocol look like? What have you done in your district?
I think, oh, go ahead, sorry, Sarah.
Sorry, I've sort of experienced it two ways. I've been here under superintendents that did want a heads up and know, and then Tim was very not that way. Tim was like, show up when you want. I don't care. I usually have given the person a heads up. I've had a tendency to, I haven't done a lot of class visits, but I've I have a tendency to like go to music recitals or orientation, or, you know, I've done more things that are open to the public where I feel like what I'm seeing is what, you know, members of the public are seeing. I wouldn't want to throw like classroom observations on a principal unannounced, just because I myself am a teacher and I know that that can make teachers crazy. So,
Really?
you know, like you know, it's always the worst possible day when someone comes in unannounced, like for it, you know, so I just wouldn't want to do that to somebody. So I said, I think there's kind of a difference between you're going to open house versus like you want to observe a 7th grade science lesson. Like those are not the same in my mind.
No, that, and thank you for making that difference apparent, because that, you know, we can go to all the musicals, all the, you know, celebrations that we want to, but, you know, we just have to be mindful that when we walk into a class, it's hard to take off that board member hat, you know, and teachers sometimes do get nervous when we show up. There was an example of a district where a board member went into a classroom and really did an evaluation on that teacher's and then left the evaluation with the principal, you know, and guess what? The teacher filed, what is that called? Not harassment, but
like a grievance.
Yeah, a grievance, but I can't think of the word for the type of grievance, but it did end up in a grievance and it did cause litigation for that school district. So just making sure that, you know, we're not disrupting. Really, I always assume good intentions. The reason why we want to go to school sites is we want to see the good things that are going on for our kids, right? And, you know, we're not going there with bad intentions, but sometimes it's hard. Even in my district, the teachers, a lot of the teachers are my best friends and our kids went to preschool together. But then when I got elected to the board and I went into their classroom, I could feel a different sense of myself being in the classroom. So just being mindful of that. Any reflections from the board, Jacob?
I think on there, I think what I do like as far as checking in with the principal about the best time to visit, I think maybe a good practice might just be, I guess I'm kind of mixed about it, because I know with Melissa, it's great. I'm going to CC her potentially when I visit a site, but I guess there's, when you have a great superintendent, it's kind of like you're just checking and you have a good relationship. So I guess I'm both. I'm like, okay, do I want to check in with the superintendent, whether it's Melissa or anybody else, or, you know, or principal's office? But I think at the very least, and I'll see what the board thinks. We should check in with the principal, and I think at the very least have practice that if we want to CC Melissa, just to let her know, like, hey, I'm gonna be by this area just in case. And just, but I think we should more from the principal aspect.
I definitely think checking with the principal, because if they have something going on, they might go, you know what, I'm doing observations that day. Could you maybe come an hour later? I think that's respectful of their position and what they have going on. And then just CCing me. You know, because the person who really needs to be like, oh, could you not come at 9, maybe 10 o'clock? Because I'm going and doing classroom observations or something. And I'd like to be able to show you whatever it is you're looking at, or have a teacher, you know, show you something, or, you know, if you're going through classrooms and yeah, just CC me. And I think that would be okay. What are your thoughts?
Oh,
what does the board feel? Or
I guess it kind of depends on what the visit's about. You know, the other day, I drove by and just, you know, wanted to see how they were doing with the food distribution and tell the guy great job. So I don't really think that, you know, warrants a email or anything like that. So, you know, I guess it just depends, like, what's the purpose of your visit? You know, you don't definitely want to show up to anybody's place unannounced, you know, but I mean, to cause a disruption, I guess as long as it's not causing a disruption in somebody's day, or, you know, popping in, like you said, I don't think anybody has bad intentions with it.
Yeah.
And I think everyone is pretty mindful of it. So I think I agree with, you know, notifying them and CCing.
I
maybe
think that
just
there's
not.
a way that we
um,
could articulate that, like board member visits at like, because like if you're stopping by food distribution, that's kind of like
Mhm.
somewhat of a public occurrence, right? And I would
Yeah.
definitely want you to be able to be like, wow, it's a big crowd. I want to go by and congratulate them on the good work they're doing, right?
Mhm.
So if there's a way that we could sort of indicate that for like different sort of events or community
Okay.
outreach kind of activities, that certainly doesn't require you need to call me or email somebody
Right.
before you do it, that you certainly are able to engage that way with the school community when there's something like that going on.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be like, a hindrance or anything like that. Just, or like if you're just in the area and you want to pop by, I don't see why.
Discourage
You know what I mean.
board members from attending public functions. Would that capture that, Melissa? How should I say that? We don't want to discourage board members from attending, trying to think how to get that content.
Because that's a very different kind of thing, like
Oh, yeah.
than wanting to do a sit down with the principal
Oh.
or go do classroom visits or things like
Mhm.
that. That's a very different kind of occurrence, like the example that Mr. Sandoval gave. And so thinking about how we would say that.
Public. You know what? I can work on the language. And like I said at the very beginning, I didn't say it at the beginning of this meeting. I'm going to capture this content. I'm going to send it back to you, and you guys are going to edit and make sure that I got your content correct before you adopt it at an open board meeting. So you'll have a chance to kind of wordsmith it too, but I'm having a problem, and I know that's a really good thing to talk about is, it's different if you're going to go in there and engage a teacher about their curriculum than just stopping by and saying, hey, good work team for getting the food out to the kids. And as a board member, I've done that at the bus garage, like I'll stop by real quick, maybe with some coffee and muffins, and I'll just say, "Wait, you guys are doing a great job. Here you go." And take off. It's not like I'm engaging every bus driver, but I just stopped by for a couple of minutes just to express my gratitude on the job that they're doing. So I'll work on that, you guys. I'll put my writer hat on and get that word for us, because I never want to discourage board members from being involved like that. That's appropriate. Doing going into a teacher's room and talking about the curriculum or how they're teaching, definite no. But, I think staff appreciate seeing board members in an area like that, about the food distribution. All right, I will work on that.
Neil had some comments. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Neil.
I just find it outlandish that any principal would take a board member to do an evaluation.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just saying, right to privacy, workman confidentiality, employment. I mean,
It's just, and you know what? I'm sure that board member had good intentions, like they were trying to make the class better. And it so happened that they were an educator. So maybe they were trying to, but again, we have to stay in our own roles and let our administrators take that task. But yeah, that was kind of, and it turned into a big deal. That's what was sad about it, and cost money that could have gone to the students, and now it's going to a lawyer in litigation. So I think that's what happens when, as board members, we step out of our role, we get the district in trouble. So yeah.
I absolutely agree with notifying the principal. I don't think anywhere on campus without the principal knowing exactly where we are and what we're doing.
Perfect.
Could not interfere at all with any instructional time whatsoever. So, for me, it's notification and discussion with the principal before you do anything.
Perfect.
Sometimes maybe through superintendent, other times through the principal, but the admin has to be informed, and admin has to know what you're doing, where you are. It's a safety issue. It's a legal issue. So, yeah.
Exactly, Neil. You're right. It is a safety issue. They have to know who's on their campus. So thank you for that. One time I went to, so I am deathly afraid of rats. And I went into, it was an open house, and I went into the teacher's classroom, and she had the rat on her shoulder, like the classroom rat. And doggone if that thing didn't jump off her shoulder. I think it smelt my fear and like made it like, okay, last time I come to your room on open house, because that was really scary for me. So yeah, I mean, and I think the teachers, the parents love to see you at open houses and back to school nights and games and, you know, different assemblies, but just giving the principal a heads up is a great practice. Okay.
Maybe we don't need to have that additional language. Can you go back up for just 1 second?
Yes.
Maybe just adding something to the top, like when visiting the program or school site, when, you know, maybe being more involved. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe
We'll
not.
we'll work on the language, I think.
Yeah,
I
just
think
that
it's just a
we do
solution,
not
though.
want to discourage. It's kind of like,
Yeah, we don't want to discourage, you know, because that's how you know what's going on in the schools too, right? I mean, and that's like watching the kindergarteners do their Christmas plays and stuff like that. Oh my goodness gracious. That's some of my best memories of me being on a school board and being involved with the school district, you know, so I'll work on that language and make sure it works. And I'm gonna, when I send this to you guys, I'll debrief with Melissa a little bit before I make sure that, and then she'll pass it on to you. So make sure I capture that right. All right, so personal problem solving. So again, this is just about if you hear information out in the community, if a member of the governance team hears disturbing, oops, phone call, sorry. If a member of the governance team hears disturbing information that has supposedly come from another member of the governance team. So this is kind of addressing relationships between board members. We will act immediately to identify the issue and address the concern with the person or persons involved. We take it to the source of the issue for resolution. We recognize that insinuation and rumors can be false and may damage relationships. So really what this is talking about, and this goes to your role as a board president, Jacob, is just if you're feeling that there's tension between a couple board members, you know, really addressing that. Like coffee does wonders, right? Like, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee and talk about why you're feeling this way. And just get it hashed out. You know what, your superintendent dealing with this, because this is really hard for a superintendent to deal with, because they don't want to take one side or another when, you know, there's something going on as the board. So really identifying, and maybe we put a piece in there that the board president will kind of facilitate conversations if something's going on, you know, on the board, or someone's feeling some way, that they're able to come to you to get that talked out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one thing I want to let the board know, and whoever becomes president in the future, is, you know, it's always good. Because I mean, I've reached out to Sarah and Neil individually, you know, just to have conversations on things. So I always appreciate, you know, feedback from each other. And so if there's bigger issues or with other board members, you know, it's always good to have that conversation.
Yeah, I just want to go on the record. I do have an issue with you, Diego. And I just want to let you know, ice cream is my preferred modality. I'm letting you know.
What flavor?
Right? Ice cream.
No, what flavor? What flavor?
Sarah might be a coffee lady, but I'm an ice cream guy. I'm just letting you know. All right.
You said coffee?
Oh man,
Oh, ice
oh
cream.
man,
Coffee
oh
for
man.
Sarah, ice cream for Patel.
But what kind of ice cream?
What flavor?
What flavor?
Jamocha almond fudge. Come on now. Come on now.
Okay, you got it.
Well, in all seriousness, Neil, I know you guys had to deal with this because right before I came on, they had to work to remove a board member who, you know, and go through the legal process of that. So I really respected how like business-like, and you know, they did it in the right way, and ultimately the person resigned, you know, but it was just a situation where someone had abdicated their responsibilities completely.
It was a difficult vote, Sarah. I mean, you never want to take away the representation of elected voters, but at the same time, voters deserve representation. You know, that's what you're elected
Yep.
to do. And this member chose not to do it. And for that reason, you know, we had to make that difficult call. But I absolutely agree with you, Sarah. We have went through this and it was a difficult process.
It is. And just, you know, being respectful, but also being open to conversations, you know, and as board president, you can tell when things are going on. If you have a board member that's usually really chatty, asking lots of questions at the board meeting, all of a sudden they're quiet, you know something's going on with that member. So that would be the time as board president, you would say, hey, let's go grab a coffee and talk about what's going on. You know, I mean, the more work you can do like that, the stronger your governance team is going to be. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You know, let's fix our relationships so your superintendent doesn't have to deal with, you know, really difficult situations like that. So, and it sounds like you guys have been through it. So you know exactly what it's about. Okay. All right, so the next one is kind of, I mean, it's like, okay, of course, we're not going to ask for preferential or personal treatment as board members. It's difficult. I had 4 kids go through during my tenure of, you know, in my high school. We're a K-12 district. And boy, I was so mindful of that. I probably erred on the other side of that, like not advocating for my kids when they had problems, because I was afraid to cross that line, right? I was afraid to talk to a principal sometimes because I would think that they were thinking that I was asking for something special for my kids when I never did that. So really, and again, this document is also for future boards. A lot of times these things aren't happening right now on your board, but they might happen in the future. And it's just clarification. Do you guys have any thoughts or reflections on that?
I've lived through this in my work life. It didn't happen to me, but a fellow teacher, the board member's high school child cheated on an exam and was caught and confessed. And there actually was a specific policy laid out about what was supposed to happen in that situation. And the board member really did not want that policy applied to their child. So it was a really negative situation. And it really, it was a horrible situation for that particular teacher to be in, because there were a lot of discussions about it when there really shouldn't have been that many discussions, because it was just this was the policy and it's the policy for everybody, and that person didn't want it to be that way.
Yeah, and I've seen that exact example in my district. We had a student that did the same. I think it was they copied some stuff off, for a term paper or something. They plagiarized. So in our district, you have like two times, and then the second time you're removed from, like, say, your ASB president, or you lose. There's stuff you lose. Well, that parent came to me actually and said, you know what, you're going to ruin my kid's life if you hold up this policy. And I'm like, okay, so we don't hold the policy for you, but we hold it for everyone else. Get in trouble, right? Rules are rules, and you have to make sure that they're equal in how you present them and how they're taken out. So thank you for that example. And like I said, it happened in my district too. Any other reflections on that one? Sarah, do you have kids in the school district?
I don't. At one point, my niece was living with me, and she was in the school district, and but she's aged out now. She's at the high school district, but
Okay.
I just tried to stay out of it. Like,
Yeah.
at least, just whatever. I am not the point person on that.
Yeah, got that. Stay out of that. Neil, do you have kids in the district?
I do. I have 2. I have one
Okay.
14, one 17. But once again, it's a fine line, so you don't want to cross it.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, regarding personal or preferential treatment, I have tried to get the school district to let me drive the electric.
Oh my goodness. Point of
Yeah.
order.
The
Point of order.
tractor.
Let me
The
drive the
tractor.
tractor. And every single one of these board members, along with that superintendent, has denied me, saying that would be preferential treatment. And I'm just letting you know.
Oh,
Are you just circling back on this, Neil? Now?
One day, 9 years
See if
out.
there's a different, I can tell you this, Neil. It won't let me drive the bus either.
But good God, we have rights. We have rights.
I would just like to point out that in the protocols, it said that once we made a decision that we won't reflect back on it. So I appreciate that, Neil, and we don't want to silence you, definitely, but I'd just like to point that out.
Well, it didn't help with the duct tape on my mouth you put on last time. I didn't appreciate that.
And Terry,
That's
I do have my daughter in the district, and next year I'll have my boys attending La Jolla,
Okay.
and it is I've been careful because I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
I am a very vocal parent, so it's been a challenge because, but I definitely want to respect teachers and not. I definitely don't want to intimidate anybody.
Right.
And I think we have a great staff, anyways, and I enjoy making fun of some of our staff member sports selections, but that's about as far as it goes. But I am being cautious with that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think my wife can handle most of the stuff anyways, but just to all the staff out there, I think you guys are doing great. And I'm just a very vocal parent sometimes, but
And
we'll be cautious of that.
Yeah, I mean, and you're still, you're brand new on the board. You'll find that line where you need to stay behind, right? I say don't stop advocating for your kids because that's our number one job, but just keep it within the parent framework. And like you said, if your wife can go, maybe that takes a little pressure off of it too. We were doing budget cuts one time, and I went to go work in one of my kids' classroom, and we were doing an art project, and the teacher said in the classroom, well, if we wouldn't have done budget cuts, we would have glue sticks to do this art project, Mrs. V. Hill. And I'm like, so sometimes you're brought in on the other side of it, right? And so I just said, yeah, you're right. It's a difficult situation to have to do cuts. But the next day I brought him a big old thing of glue sticks that I bought him. So, but it's difficult to find when you're a parent. It doesn't mean you can't work in your kids' classroom, or do the things that you did before, but you just have to be careful of the conversations that you have in there. That's all. So, yeah. And plus, what I told my kids, I will know what you did before you even get home. Like if you stub your toe, guess what? I know about it. So anyways, all right. So let's go on to orientation of new members. And I think this is really important just to talk about, what it looks like in your district. These are the bullets that I listed, and I think it's a pretty good list. But if you could think of anything else that might help with the board members getting on and getting orientated to the board, please let me know too. So take a second and look at that and make sure I covered all that, what you want listed.
Just under the reach out by board members to the new
Uh-huh.
trustee,
Mhm.
something that I did, I didn't do it for Andrew because I felt like he had Jacob, but the previous new board member, I just met them and walked them through like how I prepared for a meeting or things
Awesome.
that I looked for and that kind of thing. So just, maybe talking among yourselves and identifying like who's the person, that's going to reach out to them. Because I think if you're handed a board agenda, whether online or physically or what, it can be really intimidating. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? So just to, hear somebody else's process of what they do.
I think that's really important. Just the mentoring by the people that have been on the board for a while to the new board members is really important. You know, and this is really important to do this process because, you know, there's been, I think I said last time, a lot of contentious board races, you know, and so how do you integrate the person that was criticizing you in their, you know, when they were running for the board and now they're a part of the team? So how do you get them into the team, integrated into the team is really important. And I think you do that by reaching out by the board members. I know this year we had 4 people running for 2 seats in my district. So when they filed, I reached out to them. Introduced myself. Hey, I'm the board president. If you need any information or if there's any questions I can, you know, answer for you, please call me. And I gave them my contact. And then after the 2 new board members were identified after the election, I really reached out and gave them some, you know, resources that were helpful to get them onboarded. So really, I think that's a really good way to make them feel comfortable on the team, Sarah. Any other ideas or processes you'd like to add in this section?
Yeah, I like to add some very specific language that kind of states, you know, maybe within 30 days of when they get elected, maybe not sworn in.
Okay.
The board president reaches out maybe with the superintendent and then does an orientation. I think that would have gone a long way for me personally to kind of understand the procedures and the process and stuff. So maybe, and the reason I want specific language is so that way it continues kind of as an ongoing trend, you know, that every year we're going to be reviewing this. So every year, whoever looks at this again in the future knows, hey, within 30 days of when we get a new person elected, even before they get sworn in, reach out to them. So that way, when they get sworn in, it's kind of like easier transition.
And I have to leave it selection because sometimes board members are appointed, you know, so I want to make sure that I cover them too. So I'll reword that to capture that, Jacob. But that's a good idea. You know, I think that's really important. And is there any other documents that you'd like to add?
I have one.
Yes.
And that is Robert's Rule of Order.
Okay.
You know, a lot, you know, the process in which we go through to put things on the agenda, the vote, the discussion, you know, I think that process, you know, either instructional video would be good or a website, something that, you know, will familiarize people with the process.
Right. And so I was just doing a workshop and they gave me a site where you can order like a ringed binder of Robert's Rules of Order. And it's not that big. I'll give that resource to Melissa so she can order a couple copies of that.
And another resource that might be helpful, I know CSBA has this when you do Masters in Governance, is just a list of all the acronyms. And I know it changes all the time, but just, you know, it wasn't hard for me because I was a teacher for 20 years, but I mean, if so much of the jargon is really specific and not things that people talk about outside of education.
That's a great idea. So if you put a list of acronyms and jargon, common acronyms and jargon, you know, so that everybody knows what the LCAP, LPAC, SAT, PST, you know, FT, they all, yes, we live in that, right?
So many.
Everyone knows.
There's so many. It's like learning another language. That's what I always tell new board members, be patient with yourself. Because really, when you look at all the acronyms and all the different things you have to learn, it's the learning slope is like this, right? So that's a great one to add. Thank you, Sarah.
No, I wanted to thank Sarah because I know a lot of times in meetings, especially with my first year, she would actually pause and I almost felt like she could read it on my face that I'm not sure what they're talking about, but I'm going to follow along. And usually it was because of an acronym. And then so thank you, Sarah. You know, a lot of times she would be like, hey, just
You're very welcome. I did try to be cognizant when I was like, okay, if this is, you know, really education specific thing, I'm not going to act like it's obvious to anybody.
It's hard. There's so much. And especially like when you're going, trying to understand the school budget and stuff, there's a lot that goes with that too. So that's a great one to add, you guys. Okay, so now we go down to handling concerns, and we've talked about this a couple times. I don't know if you want to keep this one in, or if you think that we've already, talked about the protocol about complaints and concerns enough. But just take a minute, look it over, and yes or no if you'd like to keep it in.
For me, I think it's good to keep it in. I think if anything, it'll be a reminder for newer board members
Okay.
to kind of, especially this part where it says we will endeavor to ensure that everyone who brings a concern is treated fairly and equally, and that we have no power to fix the problems. I think that's really important for especially newer board members, and as a reminder to ourselves too, that we don't
Right.
doing that.
Yeah, I'd like to keep it in, and I liked the we invite the person to ultimately get back to us if the issue's not resolved. We have great staff, but things happen. Somebody goes out on an illness or some kind of leave or what. Sometimes things get dropped, even though everybody's really well intentioned. So just to have the person, they circle back around, then you can realize, oh, you know what, the person who's going to handle that, had 12 other emergencies and wasn't able to deal with it, kind of thing.
Right.
I think my concern for that third small paragraph is that earlier where we talked about complaint and inquiry reporting, that we had agreed that if a board member receives any kind of complaint, they'll refer that to the superintendent, who can then direct it to the appropriate
Okay.
staff member.
Let's change that.
So if we could just keep that same wording
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes, I would absolutely concur. I think no board member should be going to a specific staff member to handle that. Any type of question should always be directed to the superintendent.
Okay.
It's also on the very first paragraph.
Okay. To the superintendent. Okay, and then I'll take this out. Okay.
And just something that happened to me as a staff member, not a board member, was there had been something broken in a colleague's room, and just the fix it order got written up wrong. So the wrong thing got fixed, and as far as maintenance was concerned, it was taken care of. And then the poor teacher kept wondering why nobody ever came, kind of thing. So sometimes you got to complain again and just sort of say hey, this thing didn't actually happen, even though all the procedures were followed.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Okay.
The second line says we will direct the person to the persons.
Okay, we will direct the person.
I don't think we need that. It seems kind of redundant.
That out, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sometimes, it kind of overlaps, but I want to make sure that, we keep it how you guys want it to reflect your thoughts. Okay. All right. So, and again, that last sentence is just making us abstain if we get involved in the lower processes of a grievance. So, okay, so let's go to the next one, self-monitoring of governance team effectiveness. So this is just talking about we will schedule and participate in at least one workshop every year to review governance team agreements and processes, and to participate in a self-evaluation process. On an annual basis, we will review and if necessary, revise the board governance handbook. And so this is talking about a workshop, but it doesn't have to be a facilitated workshop, right? It could be a workshop that you guys are having just to discuss maybe your mission and vision, or, you know, any kind of working together in reflection like that. So it doesn't mean that, you know, you have to use CSBA for this workshop. It just means that, you know, maybe you'll have a budget workshop, or maybe you'll have a mission and vision workshop, you know, just some kind of workshop one time a year. And actually you could even do the self-evaluation process yourself if you wanted to, but sometimes it's easier if you're actually doing a self-evaluation with the facilitators so they could kind of guide that conversation, you know, but not saying that you have to do the CSBA workshop. So that's what that's talking about. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Is there a
I like this.
checklist? Sorry.
No, I was saying I kind of like the idea, maybe not how you're saying, not doing the full evaluation, but maybe if we just have, for example, this governor's thing on the agenda once a year, and won't go through the whole thing, but we can say, hey, board members, this is on the agenda. If there's one specific item that you want to have a discussion on, this will be the time and place to make that change. So that way, if in the following year we came up with something and we notice it doesn't work, then next year we can always adjust this, and it'll be kind of a good practice, I think. I think that could, for example, the governance calendar, is when that gets placed on the agenda every year, is like, hey, we're going to go through this, not the whole thing, but just a chance for board members to make changes, or the superintendent to make changes to it as well.
Right. That's really important. And, you know, just making sure like our process in our district, what we do at the beginning of the year, we set annual goals for our superintendent, and we have a workshop around that. And then that's how we do, coming up, we're talking about the superintendent evaluation, and that's how we do the evaluation of the superintendent by, you know, like we set 3 goals. We don't set 20 or 10, or, you know, we keep it very short list and measurable, right? That she can give you success indicators during the year on how she met those goals. And that's how we do the evaluation. And I think we talked about the evaluation a little bit last time, Jacob, and I was going to maybe send you guys a template from my district and what it looks like. So if it would be helpful that you could see that.
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple, so I wouldn't mind a different one just to kind of put them all together and then run them by the board.
Okay.
And also.
All right. So any questions with the workshops, or, and I know you guys have a lot of meetings, but I think it's really important at least once a year to have some kind of workshop so you can have conversations like we've had the last 2 meetings, you know, and just make sure that everyone's, you know, on the same page. Okay, going down to the superintendent evaluation, we talked about this a little bit. I will send you what we use in my district, and you guys can take a peek on that. But just making sure that you do the superintendent evaluation. A lot of times it's designated in their contract when that will happen and how it will happen. So making sure that you're looking at the contract and, you know, really honoring the contract and honoring the formal evaluation piece. Okay. Okay, so the next one, it's gotten sticky in a lot of districts, individual board member requests for information. So time is money. And, you know, if you have one board member that's just asking for reams and reams of information, then it could be really costly to the district and really hard on the staff. So what this is talking about is nice to know and need to know, making sure that if it's a request for a lot of information, that it's agreed upon by the whole board, you know, and making sure that the direction, like one board member just isn't driving this, you know. Any reflections on that from you, Melissa? How do you see that working?
It's pretty straightforward here, what you have written. It's easier sometimes, like the bottom paragraph, a lot of times like board member questions. It's with the board packet and information, a clarifying question and that kind of thing. And sometimes it may be easier just to send those questions to me because I do know the time
Okay.
constraints my directors are under.
Okay,
And if I feel like a director can just easily answer the question, it's no problem for me to loop them back in and say, I've asked Victor to answer this question about the MOT section on this board agenda item. And that way I know, or if I know he's swamped, but I happen to know the answer, I can just go ahead and answer it on his behalf.
okay.
I'd get the board's thoughts on that, of course.
Yeah, you guys, let me hear your reflections on that.
No, I agree, and that makes sense, especially how you were saying, Melissa, that especially like if they have their deadlines or workload, and they kind of might put them a little bit pressured. So I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this was so we set up good practices.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that as far as just submitting the questions to you directly, and then if you feel like the director needs to be looped in, I don't know how the rest of the board.
Okay,
Yeah, and I kind of feel like if it's a big issue, it might be something that we need to agendize to like talk about the issue rather than giving somebody, you know, reams of information. I mean,
Yep.
so just, you know, trying to bring it to the front and really talk about like what are we trying to get to. And, you know, just in a neighboring district, I know they were trying to explore, they had a lot of veteran teachers at some schools and very few veteran teachers at other schools. So, you know, it sort of started with a board member's request for information, but I think that it really should have started as like an agenda item in terms of, you know, like in other words, if there's not a discrepancy in outcomes between those two schools, then that's not really important information. You know, it's sort of like taking it back to like, what's our big aim, which is, you know, how are the kids doing kind of thing.
exactly. Exactly. And, you know, and if it is a big ticket item, like some huge decision, I think it's good to bring it back 3 times. First as information, second as a discussion, and third as an action. Because then the stakeholders, you know, are going to say, hey, they had it 3 times as a item on the agenda. We got the chance, if we wanted to interject or have reflections on that issue 3 times. And I think that that's being transparent, and that's, you know, trying to include your stakeholders in a meaningful way. So that's a good practice. But I think, yeah, if it's going to be a huge amount of information and work for staff, it needs to come from the whole board.
So I guess to kind of go back that on a little bit, because I know there's been like sometimes requests for reports in the past. Like, how would you best want that handled? So like, as far as if an individual board member versus if 2 or 3 board members request the same report, or what's probably the best practice that you think would probably be?
Well, if it's just like a standard report that may have shown up on an earlier agenda, and they're like, can I get a copy of that report? That's easy to generate for that one board member. So that, to me, there's that. But certainly if the board prefers that we set a protocol that if a board member requests information and I'm going to share that back out with the board member who requested, that I go ahead and copy you all on that response, just so you know the information that's being shared with one board member is not unfairly distributed.
Yep.
We can certainly set that up. And is there a level of information request that triggers that? You're not asking, you know, I mean, if you're asking for a clarification of something on the agenda or the Friday letter, is
Right.
that considered, you know, I could just answer right back out to Neil because he said, I'm not understanding what this means right here. So is there a trigger point at which something is communicated back out to all board members that this question was asked and this is the answer?
Right. And so a good rule of thumb that a lot of districts use, if it takes more than half an hour to gather that information, that's a big ticket item and that needs to go to the whole board. But I think it's a good practice, Melissa, you know, just and don't respond, guys. Like if she sends you something, don't respond. But if you know, if Jacob or anyone asks a good question, get that information to the whole board. I don't think, include it on your Friday or, send it as a separate email. I think that's really good practice.
Okay, so
Well, I'm a new board member, so I have a lot of questions. And one of the things that kind of makes me ask those questions is we have to approve the items. So
Yeah.
I understand not getting like lost in the weeds, but I'll just give you a quick example. And I don't think Melissa was included on this email, but I was kind of curious. I saw on the agenda one time that we were getting pool fees charged. And so I was like, oh, well, that's a lot of money. What we were getting charged, I don't know, it was like $1,000 a month. I didn't understand it. And so, well, first I didn't realize we had a robotics pool. So that was great. But I also wondered during COVID, we're paying for pool maintenance. So I was like, so those kind of questions, I have a lot of those questions. And I know they do take up time, but I feel like if I didn't have to approve it, I wouldn't ask the question. But, and so I don't know how, I don't think they've taken up that much time, but I am one of those people who has asked and will continue to ask questions.
Right,
But,
right. Well, and it's a learning process for the whole board, right? I mean, it's important that you have clarification on things before you vote on them. So I don't think that would be a bad thing if you had 5 or 6, questions, you just got them in an email and either, whatever the board wish, like if you send them straight to the superintendent, you send them to the board president, to the superintendent, however you wanted to work that, I don't think that's a problem. As long as it's not, you know what I'm saying?
To
The
me,
half an hour rule is probably a good.
I'm
rule.
absolutely okay. And Jacob, you give input on this. I'm okay with individual board members sending their questions to me for, and then we can work with directors to get those answers for them, or if I'm able to answer it, I can do that. And then maybe, and I think I've done this for you all in the past, is I'll just summarize what the request was. So that the information attached, you're like, why are you sending me this thing about pool fees? I can just simply say, Mr. Sandoval requested information about monthly pool fees. Please see attached.
Yeah,
Right.
because I think that's great. And plus, if Andrew has a question, maybe another board member has a question. Maybe that answers their question. And the equity of information is really important. I think that's a great practice. Melissa, is that okay with you, Jacob? Does that sound good?
yeah, no, I think that's a good practice to just reach the director. I think that
So if we made our standard procedure that responses to requests for information will be summarized and disseminated to all other board members.
Okay. Questions regarding the agenda items will go to the, I'll put that right here. I'm just gonna say summarize, and that'll remind me to write that.
And something, sort of informal that we've done in the past is kind of like the pool question. I've called many times because I had questions about individual checks. And sometimes before we've adopted the consent agenda, I would say, like, before we adopt the consent agenda, just for the public, I asked a question about blah, blah, blah. And, and one time I remember it was car rentals, and it was completely legitimate what it was. But I was like, why are we renting cars? I don't understand. And then there was a reason.
Yeah, and it shows that you're being fiscally responsible, right? You're asking questions about where the money's going. So I think that that's legitimate. As long as you ask it before, the staff knows you're going to ask the question. They have the information to answer your question. It's just respect all the way around, right? I think that's a great practice. All right. Okay, so we're down to the last 3. This one is individual board member requests for action. And so this is just saying that the direction rests with the governance team. Like, one board member can't tell the superintendent what to do on an issue, right? I used to do superintendent searches, and I always felt bad for the superintendents that had a board of 5 people and was giving different direction from each of the 5 people. How does a superintendent survive that? Not very well. And that's really difficult. So it's just talking about, you know, when you guys give direction, it has to be the collective voice of the board. It can't just come from one person.
The other thing I was going to mention on that is I think it's really good how at the end of the agenda we ask if there's any future agenda items, but I think also
Yes.
if board members want to email either Melissa or myself and saying, hey, just a reminder, I did bring this up. Because I think it's kind of what Sarah was saying. Sometimes we get so busy with so many fires might be putting on that might get missed. So I think it's also a good practice for board members, if there's something that you really feel is important, to email, you know, either Melissa or the board president and letting us know like, hey, can we really have this as an informational item or something to go on as well? Because it kind of, when there's a paper trail, I think that kind of helps out a little bit. Because I know at times, even for myself, and I'm sure Melissa, after a long day at work running the district, you know, to remember everything, you kind of have to debrief after the board meeting at times, I'm sure, of a long day. So I think an email or a follow-up, I think will also be helpful too.
Okay. I'll put that. Oh, where was I? Right here. Okay.
Ideally, if those requests come to the board president and the superintendent, and then there's some accountability between the two of us as we go over those agendas, and we can say, okay, it's not timely on the next meeting, but maybe the following one, and go ahead and
Okay.
schedule those out and get them on our governance calendar.
Calendar. Yeah. Okay.
I like that.
Sounds good. I'll add that language. Okay, so now we're down to board meeting management. And this is just saying that, you know, our meetings are board meetings in public. They're not public meetings. And a lot of times we have to explain that, you know, at our board meetings. Not that we're trying to shut people down, but due to the Brown Act, we can't talk about things that aren't on our agenda. Right. So they have that 3 minutes at the beginning to talk about things that aren't on the agenda, and just making sure that the stakeholders and public understand that we have to follow protocols on how we do our meetings. It's not that we're saying, oh, we don't want to listen to you, we don't want your input. It's just, this is how they have to run. So just making sure the public understands that is really important. And it's hard, right? When you're getting that 3 minutes and people are telling you about something, you know, you can't jump in and explain yourself, and that's really hard. But you can't engage with the public in that 3 minutes. You have to be really careful of that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One thing I did read was I think we can engage, but as a governing board, we are able to ask clarifying questions or direct the superintendent. Because I know when I came on the school board, and it was before Tim, you know, they kind of told me, and I heard this all the time, it says, oh, if somebody goes up there and makes a public statement, you can't talk. But that's not correct. I mean, I even look it up in the California Constitution, and there is a space there that states that we can engage in a debate, but we are able to at least ask a clarifying question, or maybe direct staff or the superintendent, like, hey, or at least say, hey, thank you for your concern, or can you clarify about this? So I think I would want to change on this is we're not going to engage in a conversation, but at the very least acknowledge and ask a clarifying question. Because I think just by even acknowledging their statement, I think that already lets the public know they got heard.
Right.
It makes it difficult when you go up there and everybody's super quiet and nobody's saying anything.
That last statement there about only the chair will respond to public comment, that's where that provision for asking clarifying questions or then giving directive to staff to follow up on something. And it's really to mitigate a back and forth debate, but there is a provision for being able to ask direct clarifying questions and then give some direction to staff, particularly if they want some follow-up or additional information about something.
And I think I would want to change it, then I'm not just the chair, but I think any board member can ask clarifying questions, because I think that kind of gives a lot of power to the board president, that if maybe other board members had a question on that and the board member doesn't, or the board president doesn't ask it.
So we could say something like board members will respond to public comment during the meeting only to ask clarifying questions. Direction may be given to staff for follow-up. So then instead of only the chair, it would be board trustee
Yeah.
or board members.
Okay,
Does that kind of
yeah.
cover?
Yeah,
it
that's
for
good.
us?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what they do at the Salinas City Council meetings is that if they tell the person who the staff member is, it's going to follow up with, like, for some people, they're like, okay, we took down your information. For other people that have something, they'll say like, this person from this department will be responding to you, like this,
Yeah.
or will be given that information or something, so that the person has like some knows what the next step is a little bit.
Okay, got it.
And I mean, we could, someone will be following up with you,
Okay.
not even necessarily naming that person.
Okay, got it. And that's what most districts do anyways. It's not like said, but the superintendent will tell staff, hey, go connect with that person. And I don't know if you guys use the cards to fill
We
out
do.
requests to, so that's a good way to follow up too, because they usually put their name and number. You can't make them fill out a card to speak, but you can say, hey, could you please, but if they want to talk without filling out the card, they're able to. So anyways, okay, I'll get that changed. And then the last one we have is board notification. And this is just talking about, like, if something huge happens in the district, how do you want the superintendent to communicate that to you? Read this, I'll give you a second, read that and see if that makes sense, or if you'd like me to make any changes to it.
Looks good to me, unless anybody else has any suggestions.
Well, we've usually, and Melissa, I'm sure you could explain this more clearly than I can, but we've had a specific like emergency text alert system that we've used, in emergencies that includes like principals and that kind of thing. And I know not to respond to it, in terms of then it turns into a meeting, but just, it's been good sort of having updates like the sewage line is broken, our PG&E will be at, wherever. And it's been good.
Yeah. So
And
that's something that kind of fell by the wayside, but we can certainly pick that back up where if we do our text chain for pertinent information that way. And like Sarah said, you have to be careful about responding to it so that we're not engaging in a dialogue. It's more just receipt of information.
Okay. And I added text. It said, you'll reach out to board members via telephone. I just added text because a lot of times that's what my superintendent does is, hey guys, this is what happened and this is where it happened and, heads up. So I just added text right there. So any other changes to that board notification that work for everyone? Okay. Oh my God, it's 7:28, you guys, and we finished.
Hey.
I don't know what I'm going to do next Monday without you guys, really. I mean, I don't know. Well, thank you for your engagement. I think we did good work. We got clarifications, especially with your new governance team. You have a new superintendent, new board members. It's really important to talk about these protocols. And now we have them, we'll have them memorialized in your governance handbook. And like I said, the process will be go through, change the content that we wanted to change. I'll get that to Melissa. She can kind of look it over, get it to you guys. You guys do your edits, and then you adopt this at an open board meeting. So, and again, I want to say, I enjoyed working with your district. I'm your girl at CSBA now. If you have any questions, you need anything, please contact me. A lot of times I can get you information from CSBA on certain subjects, that you might need. I know that you guys have done a lot of work with equity. We're coming out with the equity module on our online learning Center. And also Nicole Anderson is she's creating a new cohort to do equity studies. And if you're interested, she has your superintendent and 2 members come and work with her and look at your district regarding equity. So she's starting that. If I can send you the information, Melissa, maybe if you'd be interested in doing some equity work in your district. But anyways, just again, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's engagement and what they added to the meeting, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Terry, as well. I appreciate all the board members and Melissa for taking the time. I know it's a lot of extra meetings that we do to work well, but I think this was super important, especially now that Melissa's taking over, that we have a good start and we have good procedures in place to make our job, but more importantly Melissa's job, and running the district, so that way she feels supported and there's clear protocol, and so there's just not that assumption. So I appreciate that. So thank you, Terry, for leading us through that as well.
Yes,
Thank
it turned
you.
out to be very timely, Terry. Thank you
I know, right?
spending
It's
a couple
awesome.
Monday evenings with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm, again, I'll get this back to you guys and just make sure I captured everything correctly. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Maybe you want to do like a board self evaluation, and I can work with you on that too. So thank you guys. Thank you for the 2 Mondays, and I will get this work back to you.
Thank
Bye,
you, Terry. I
guys.
appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
very,
you.
very, very much.
Thank you. There we go. Stop share. All right. Well, take care, guys. You have a good rest of your evening.
Bye, Terry.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to future board items. Is there any final reflections on the good beginnings or anything else you guys want to add before we close it up? No?
I want to personally thank you, Jacob, for this, because for me, it's a new beginning with Melissa as the helm of this district. And I like the open dialogue, and I look forward with working with Melissa and to continue this dialogue and building a great relationship as time moves forward. And I expect a lot of great things to happen. So, but thank you for creating this process and processes that will be policies in the future, for the rest of the following board. So thank you very much.
Can I go ahead? You want to say something, Sarah? Or?
No, just thank you to everybody for your time.
Yeah, I think it was a great, great beginnings or new beginnings was the title of it. I think it was great. I think we made some really good progress and had really great conversations. And I've met Nicole Jensen. She's really great. She's really great at facilitating really difficult conversations. But
You mean Terry? Oh,
no, Nicole is the one who she mentions is going to be doing a workshop on
Nicole Anderson.
equity.
Yeah.
Anderson, sorry. Yes, Nicole.
Sorry,
Anderson.
I got confused.
Yes, she's also great with facilitating things. So I hope we can do that in the future, in the near future. But anyways, I think it was great. And Melissa, I appreciate all your input and from everything I've seen on this workshop, it seems like we all have the same mentality and the same goals. So I'm excited about that.
Cool. Can I get a motion to adjourn at 7:33?
No. Whoa. Listen, when I first started, these board meetings would go to 10, 11 o'clock at night. All right. Now, I'm just letting you know, I'm going to object each and every time because I want to go back to the old days and no one will let me.
Okay. I'll motion to adjourn at
One last thing.
7:33.
Hold on, I'm not done yet.
Okay, go ahead.
There was incentive that was discussed about food. I'm okay with barbecue. I'm just letting you know. Salinas City Barbecue does a really good job out there. I'm just, you can feed the man every once in a while.
Mr. Patel, if I promise to try to let you drive the tractor, will you just go ahead and adjourn meeting?
Yes.
Consensus building.
And the magic school bus. And the magic school bus.
Okay, I think we need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
I got a school bus out
So,
of this.
Mr. Patel, how do you vote on adjourning the meeting?
Oh, aye, Captain.
Wow.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Thank you for the consensus building, Melissa. Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Ariano isn't present. Motion passes 4-0. I'll see everyone Wednesday.
See you Wednesday. Bye.